There are moments in life when everything we believe is permanent disappears in a matter of minutes. A home, a road, a garden, a photograph on a wall, a chair that has been sitting on the same veranda for decades. And sometimes, when the water finally goes down, what remains is not just destruction. What remains is a question. How do you begin again when almost everything you had is gone? Our story takes place in the green, mountainous landscape of Tonquepy, near Man, in western Côte d'Ivoire. Here, surrounded by forested hills, red earth paths, and a rocky stream, stood a small and extremely poor rural community. The houses were simple, hand-built walls of earth and mud, rough wooden posts, thick roofs made from bundles of local grass and reeds. There was very little money here, but there was something far more valuable. There was home. Among the people living here were Thomas Dago, 72 years old, and his wife Grace, 68. Thomas was thin, quiet, and already slightly bent by age and years of hard work. Grace was small and gentle, her face carrying the marks of a difficult life. Every morning, Thomas worked a tiny piece of land near their house. Grace prepared simple meals. They did not own much. A few cooking pots, some clothes, an old wooden chair outside the house, and one faded family photograph that had survived many years with them. Their life was poor, but it was familiar. It was theirs. Then the rain began. At first, there was nothing unusual about it. A few heavy drops striking the dry red earth. Then the clouds grew darker. The wind became stronger. Rain began falling across the mountains in enormous sheets. Water poured down the forested slopes. Small gullies became streams. Streams became torrents. And those torrents began converging toward the valley below. The people of the village watched the rocky stream rise. Brown water climbed over its banks. The red earth road disappeared. Yards vanished. Small gardens were swallowed, and within an astonishingly short time, the flood was no longer passing through the village. The village was inside the flood. People grabbed their children. The elderly helped one another. There was no time to carry furniture, no time to save possessions, only time to move. Thomas and Grace struggled toward higher ground. But just before leaving their old home, Thomas saw something fall inside the flooding room. The family photograph. For a moment, he turned back. Water was already rushing through the house. He reached down. His hands found the photograph, and he held onto it. It was only a picture. It was only a picture. But sometimes, when the world around you is being destroyed, a small piece of memory can feel like the last part of your old life, still within reach. Then the water rose even higher. The lower part of the village disappeared beneath a violent river of mud. In the deepest areas, the flood reached several meters above the original ground. Entire one-story homes sank beneath the water. Only pieces of grass-covered roofs remained visible. Trees were ripped from the earth. Branches, logs, broken timber, and torn thatch raced through the current. Thomas, Grace, and several others were forced into the water. They struggled to swim. Their clothes became heavy. Their faces showed fear, exhaustion, and desperation. Ahead of them was one of the few houses standing on higher ground. People already on the roof stretched their arms down. Thomas reached upward. For one terrible moment, the current pulled him away. Then another man caught his wrist. Their hands locked. Thomas was dragged toward the roof. Grace came next. She reached upward through the muddy water. Another pair of hands found hers. And slowly, painfully, she was pulled to safety. One by one, the survivors climbed onto the few remaining refuge roofs. Below them, the place they had known all their lives was disappearing. Then came another violent surge. Mud moved down the hillside. A large section of earth collapsed. Trees crashed into the water. Thomas and Grace could only watch as their old house was struck. The walls gave way. The roof collapsed. The old wooden chair outside was swept into the flood. In seconds, the home they had lived in for years was gone. Thomas still held the wet photograph. That was all. Eventually, the worst of the storm began to weaken. But rescue was still incredibly difficult. The road into the village no longer existed. It had become part of the flood. Min and the outside rescue team arrived as far as their vehicles could safely travel. From there, they had to continue by boat. 2 small rescue boats were launched into the muddy water. The crews moved slowly through submerged houses, floating logs and powerful currents. There was no room for mistakes. When they reached the refuge roofs, children were helped first. Life jackets were secured. Then came the elderly. Some people could barely stand. Others were too frightened to look at the water below them. But one by one, they were moved into the boats. One roof, then another, until the final survivors were brought to high ground. For the first time since the flood began, everyone was away from the water. They had survived. But survival was only the beginning. Food was distributed. Clean water was brought in. The elderly were checked. Children were given dry places to rest. And when the flood finally receded enough for engineers to return, the scale of the destruction became clear. The old settlement was no longer a safe place to rebuild life exactly as it had been before. So a new plan began to take shape. Not in the low flood zone, but on higher, safer land. A new resettlement community. Around 20 new houses. Simple houses. Not luxurious. Not enormous. But strong, clean, and dignified. The homes were built in an organized layout on elevated ground. 4 orderly rows. 5 houses in each row. Every home facing the same direction. Every roof built to the same design. Every family given a safer place from which to start again. Inside were things that many of us barely notice in everyday life. A clean floor, fresh walls, a simple kitchen, a sink, a cooking area, a table, chairs, a bed, a wardrobe, electric lights, a place to charge a phone, a door that could close at night, a roof that could keep out the rain. For Thomas and Grace, their new house stood near the middle of the community. And one afternoon, when everything was finally ready, Min met them outside. In his hand was a small key. Thomas looked at it. Grace looked toward the house. For several seconds, neither of them moved, because that little piece of metal represented something much larger. It meant they no longer had to wonder where they would sleep. It meant Grace could cook inside a clean kitchen again. It meant Thomas could wake up and step outside onto his own veranda. It meant they had a front door again. Min placed the key into Thomas's hand. Thomas closed his fingers around it. Then he walked toward the door. He inserted the key, turned it, and opened their new home. Inside, the light fell across clean walls and new wooden furniture. Grace slowly ran her hand across the kitchen worktop. Thomas looked at the bed. Then the wardrobe. Then the small table where they would eat together. Min showed them the lights. With one small movement of a switch, the room brightened. And suddenly, something as ordinary as a light bulb became extraordinary. Later, other doors opened across the settlement. Other families entered their own new homes. Children began playing along the dry red earth paths. Elderly residents sat beneath their verandas. Small gardens appeared beside the houses. Cassava was planted again. Vegetables began to grow. Clean water filled household containers. Cooking pots returned to the fire. And when evening came, small lights began glowing from the windows. The settlement no longer looked like a construction project. It looked alive. Thomas began working the soil beside his new home. Grace began preparing meals again. Their routines returned. Not exactly as before, because some things could never be replaced. The old house was gone. Years of possessions were gone, and the memory of that flood would remain with them forever. But the story did not end in the water. It did not end on a rooftop. It did not end with a collapsed house. It ended with a door opening, with children walking safely between new homes, with an elderly couple sitting together again, with a community learning that losing almost everything does not always mean losing the future, Because rebuilding is not only about bricks, roofs, or furniture. It is about restoring something disaster tries to take away. Security, dignity, hope, and perhaps most importantly, the belief that after the darkest night of your life, there can still be a morning worth waking up for.